Sorry guys, still no exemplar or animus, but we did get a bunch of class archetypes in this book, including one that people have been wanting for a long time. Hello team players! Today we're talking about the Vindicator class archetype, which can also be known as the Inquisitor. Let's dive in. The Vindicator is a Ranger class archetype. And that means you have to take the Vindicator dedication at 2nd level. For adjustments, first, you must choose a deity to be a follower of, and you gain that deity's sanctification, so holy or unholy, depending on the deity. You also become trained in religion rather than nature. You also become trained in your deity's favorite weapon. If your deity's favorite weapon is a simple weapon or an unarmed attack with the damage dice less than 1d6, you gain the Deadly Simplicity Cleric feat. If your deity's favorite weapon is an advanced weapon, you gain proficiency in that weapon equal to what you have with martial weapons. If you plan on being a Vindicator, you must select the Vindicator's Edge for your Hunter's Edge. Finally, you learn Warden spells as divine spells and not primal spells, but you still use your wisdom as your spellcasting modifier. And if you gain focus spells through the Domain Initiate and Advanced Domain feats, which are part of this archetype, you learn them as Warden spells for the purposes of Vindicator abilities. So while Inquisitors in 1e were more ranged attackers, Vindicators / Inquisitors in 2e can be very much melee, especially with some of the Warden spells from Howl of the Wilds. This class archetype is very much focused on focus spells though, so Wisdom is more than likely going to be your highest stat. For our Vindication Edge, we get a +1 bonus to spell attack rolls against our hunted prey, and they take a -1 penalty on their saving throws against our divine spells, including our Warden spells. This is a status bonus and status penalty, respectively. We also gain the Vindicator's Mark focus spell. With Vindicator's Mark, we make a spell attack roll against our hunted prey. If we hit, we deal 2d4 spirit damage to the target. In addition, for the next minute, the target is marked with a glowing nimbus of magic that only we can see, and takes a +2 bonus on any damage from our weapons or unarmed attacks. In addition, invisible creatures that are marked are only concealed to us rather than undetected. And if our last action was a strike that did damage with one of our weapons or unarmed attacks, we can dismiss this spell to deal an additional 2d6 damage to it. Hardly anything in this game resists spirit damage. There are definitely creatures that are immune to it, but hardly anything resists it. Which means these particular rangers have an option to get over enemy resistances, which is big. And remember, if we pick the right deity, we are sanctified, which means we can trigger the weaknesses of things that are weak to holy or unholy damage. And we get this just for being a Vindicator, or I guess Inquisitor if our deity is unholy, or we choose to be unholy. At level 5, Trackless Journey can apply to either urban or natural terrain, meaning it doesn't matter what type of campaign you're in. You can always use Trackless Journey. And at level 17, for our Masterful Hunter, the bonus and penalty increase to +2 and -2 respectively from our Vindication Edge. Now let's talk about the Vindicator dedication, which of course we have to take at level 2 if we want to be a Vindicator. You can use religion instead of the normal skill if you want to coerce, gather information, make an impression, or make a request, as long as you're in a town that has a church dedicated to your deity. In addition, if the target of these actions is also a follower of your deity, or happens to be your hunted prey, then you get a +2 bonus on the check. These first two are more out of combat options, but remember that this is tied to Ranger, which means we have plenty of in-combat options as well. Plus, we will be talking about in-combat options for the Vindicator. Next up, we've got Interrogate. For one action, you can make an intimidation check against the will DC of a creature that you can see and you've been conversing with. You receive a +2 bonus on this check if the target is a member of your religion or is an undead or were creature pretending to be part of your religion. On a critical success, the target must answer your question truthfully. They don't have to tell the truth, but you receive a +4 bonus to tell whether they're lying to you. If you succeed, it's the same thing, but the bonus is only +2. On a failure, the target can refuse to answer your question and becomes unfriendly if they weren't already unfriendly or hostile. If you critically fail, the target flat out refuses to answer you and becomes hostile if it wasn't already. In addition, you can't use Interrogate on that creature for 24 hours. This is why Charisma is going to be more important for Vindicators than it is for other Rangers. Because Intimidation goes off Charisma. And unfortunately, our dedication only allows us to coerce people with religion. And that's only if we are in a city with a church dedicated to our deity, which is not always going to be the case. But with this feat, you can interrogate anybody, even during combat, which is pretty amazing. If you need information out of a target, this is a feat you want to take. Absolutely. Next up is Disrupt Oppose Magic. This is effectively reactive strike, except that number one, you can use it with a ranged weapon, and number two, you can only use it with your deity's favorite weapon, and three, it only works on spells. Also, if you hit it at all, you just flat out disrupt a spell. Honestly, not a huge fan of this one because you're not going to run into enemies casting spells all that often. It's mostly going to be melee or ranged physical attacks. But I can definitely see why they put this here, and it does give Rangers effectively a reactive strike, which they normally don't get. So this feat is good, it's just a little situational. Depends on what you're running into, whether you'll take this feat or not. Now we can talk about Vindicator's Judgement, which gives you the focus spell of the same name. For one action, you can force your hunted prey to make a fortitude saving throw. This spell ends immediately if the target is no longer your hunted prey. Should they critically succeed, again, nothing happens. However, should they just regularly succeed, they gain weakness 5 to the next damaging strike you make against it, or the next damaging divine spell you cast that includes it as a target until the end of your next turn. Should they fail to save, they gain weakness 5 to all your strikes and damaging divine spells for the duration of the spell. Should they critically fail, the target is off guard against the first strike you make against it or the first damaging divine spell you cast each round for the duration of the spell. I always say that weakness is a pretty big deal, and it is. So, you definitely want to take this one for a lot of Rangers. This is especially going to help melee Rangers, but it'll help ranged as well. It's too bad you can't get this with the Flurry Hunter's Edge. That would be amazing. But the Vindication Edge is pretty good. And the final feat for the Vindicator archetype is Call the Hunt. So we can spend one action if we are observing our prey to make the target off guard to all melee attacks as long as we and at least one of our allies are within melee reach of that enemy. In addition, if we are sanctified, then that applies to all of our and our allies' weapon attacks and unarmed strikes. Which means that if the enemy is weak to holy or unholy damage, all of our allies can take advantage of that, whether they're using melee or ranged weapons. Pretty big. Very, very good feat here. I highly recommend this one. Of course, all of this only applies to our hunted prey, but again, this is tied to Ranger, which means if we have multiple hunted prey, then this applies to all of them, which there are feats under Ranger that we can use to have multiple hunted prey. And of course, share our Hunter's Edge benefit with our allies. This gives Vindicators quite a bit of versatility with their spells, which is pretty awesome. And that's the Vindicator class archetype done. I know this seemed like a shorter video, but remember that this is tied to Ranger, which means that you can take Ranger feats on top of this. Next is a build using this archetype, so definitely keep an eye out for that. But if you guys enjoyed this video, go ahead and leave a like, and do all that other YouTube stuff. You can also check out the links in the description below for my Discord, my Patreon, and my social media, including my Twitch. And if you guys want tips for Rangers, you can check out this video here. Thank you guys so much for watching, and remember, teamwork is vital. It helps us solve problems.